This is a Deepcool Assassin 4, and it's a pretty good air cooler. Regardless of what CPU you attach it to, it's probably gonna do pretty well. The thing is though, the basic design behind this cooler has been industry standard since the Greeks invaded Mesopotamia. You've got a bit of copper touching the CPU, with heat pipes drawing heat into fin stacks with fans attached to them. However, recently, Deepcool threw a vapor chamber into that age-old recipe with this new version of the Deepcool Assassin 4. It's in an unmarked box because I lost the sleeve on the outside, I don't know where it is. And in today's video, we're going to see how much adding a vapor chamber to this age-old recipe helps with performance. Oh yeah, isn't that a beauty? Now, aside from some aesthetic differences like this little magnetically attachable screen that shows you temperatures and stuff on the Assassin 4 VC, which is a pretty cool touch, and the vapor chamber, these two coolers are functionally, as far as I understand it, identical, which means it's a very good comparison to see how much of a performance difference the little vapor chamber makes. But before we compare the performance of these two, we should probably talk about what a vapor chamber is and how it's different from the base of the original cooler. Now, with the original Assassin 4, as you can see here, you've got a bunch of heat pipes, which are copper tubes filled with... Is it radon gas? What is the gas?
A few moments later.
Oh, it's water. I don't know why I thought it was radon. What in the world? Okay, so I clearly only have a vague understanding of how a heat pipe works, so I guess we need a quick refresher. Now, this is how a heat pipe works. You've got an outer copper casing, a wick, and an air cavity. And there's also some water in there, so that when you attach a hot thing like a CPU to one end, the water boils in the cavity. The water vapor then travels up the tube to the cooler side, which is attached to like the fin stack with the fan and stuff, where the gas condenses, where it transfers the latent heat that it carried up from the hot side in a gaseous form into the copper that's attached to the fin stack. The liquid, now in the wick, is carried back down to the hot side via capillary action, where the cycle repeats. Which is really cool. It's basically like a tree root carrying heat from your CPU. And the reason why it's so useful is it lets you spread the heat from your CPU over a much wider fin stack than it would have without using a heat pipe. Now, on the standard version of the Assassin 4, which has 6 heat pipes, it's quite a lot, you've got a normal copper contact plate. So there's basically like a bit of copper that then transfers heat into the heat pipes. Whereas with the special edition one, instead of that copper plate, you've got a vapor chamber, which isn't just a slab of copper. In Deepcool's own words, and I'm paraphrasing here, is basically like a huge heat pipe that's been flattened by the massive weight of your ball. It's a very similar structure, except you have these little supports around it so that it doesn't collapse under any pressure, which is important for an air cooler because you do mount it quite hard. But apparently, replacing the standard copper contact with a vapor chamber does increase the efficiency of the cooler quite a lot. Although it kind of varies. I mean, if you look at the official cooler ratings, according to Deepcool, the standard Assassin 4 is rated for 280 watts, whereas the vapor chambered one is just 300 watts. That's not a huge increase, but maybe in the real world it will lead to a lot better cooling performance. Well, let's find out. Now, for the testing, I'm going to do it with the professionalism of 1,000 Japanese salarymen. I'm starting with an Intel i9 14900K. I think, is it a... Never mind, it's a 3900KF, which is a very high power draw CPU, which should put some pretty good strain on our coolers over here. So all that was left to do was mount the Assassin 4 using some Noctua NTH2 thermal paste. I then went into the BIOS to set the fan speeds to a consistent RPM so that doesn't affect the temperature results. But clearly, the 65% fan speed I chose wasn't nearly enough to cool the monstrous 3900KF. The moment I started the IDA64 stress test, some terrible things happened. Start. Suddenly we got 100% load, which is, at this moment, 250 watts. Oh, overheating. Oh, that's not good. The fans need to spin up more. That's not good. But even with 100% fan speed, the moment that 250 watt load hit, the cooler just crumbled. Which, in all fairness to the Assassin 4, even big AIOs struggle to take the CPU's massive load to the face. Either way, I still wanted to check if I did something wrong. Oh, never mind. That's what I would call pretty good thermal contact. I even thought I may have put the center fan in the wrong way around, but it turns out after a bunch of tinkering that the issue was with the mounting bracket on the motherboard. I didn't screw 2 of the bottom knobs down all the way, and with that improvement the cooler managed to stomach the load for about 20 seconds before overheating this time, which is an improvement. But either way, I just waited for the CPU to drop out of its boost power draw, and then let the test run for about 10 minutes before taking the temperature at that lower power draw. Well, the temperatures plateaued a while ago, and we're hovering between 58 to 62 degrees Celsius, which is pretty good for our 120-ish watts. So let's play some games and see what the temperatures do then. So with Cyberpunk running at 1440p ultra settings with a 4090, the CPU's drawing about 120 watts, where we're getting between 60 and 65 degrees Celsius, which is a good result. This is with the fans at 100% fan speed, but they're not super high RPM fans, so it's relatively quiet. Like honestly, the system isn't that offensive despite being on a box right next to it. So now that we've seen what the standard loser copper-based Assassin 4 can do, let's drop the vapor chambered Chad on here and see how much of a difference it makes. Straight off the bat, there wasn't really a difference. It took the same amount of time to start overheating with the full load in its face, and then when the power draw stabilized at 120-ish watts, the temperature variation was maybe slightly less than without the vapor chamber, and the more consistent CPU plot in IDA64 read a degree lower, but it was basically within the margin of error. The thing is though, 120 watts is a lot lower than the rated power draw of the cooler, so I'll also try overclocking it and see if there's a bigger temperature delta then. But let's leave that for the gaming section. First, let's see the standard gaming result. Now our unoverclocked gaming results, again, are very similar to the IDA64 results. The fluctuation is maybe a little bit lower than it was without the vapor chamber, which means we're looking at some real margin of error differences here. It's very slight. But let's see what happens when we push some more power into our 13900KF. Maybe a heavier load will lead to a bigger delta? Let's see. So our power draws jumped about 50 watts here to around 170, which is a lot for a CPU while gaming, and this is without the vapor chamber. And the temperatures have also jumped by about 10 degrees Celsius. Ah yes, there we go, it's finally made a difference. Now again, it's not a huge difference, but the range of fluctuation of CPU temperatures is definitely a bit lower with the vapor chamber on there. And then a quick note, with the vapor chamber, the CPU power draw is ever so slightly lower than it is without the vapor chamber one, which is really weird because, well, they were using the same settings. But either way, with a very reasonable 170 watts of CPU power draw while gaming, I'd at least call that a little bit of a success, which is nice. So with that, it seems like with a vapor chamber, you get more benefit out of it the closer you are to the limits of capacity of the cooler, which kind of explains why you mainly find them in laptop coolers and stuff like that, where the actual heatsink is a pretty big limitation. But with that, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think down below, subscribe to the channel on the way down there, and maybe check out the merch store for some awesome noob t-shirts. And until the next video, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.